Thanks for tuning in to this week's edition of You Ask the Utes. Our first question comes from David Larson, and it asks, why does this year's team seem to be so much more focused on the defensive side of the ball than last year's team? And I would say that this year's team is just buying in more to the defensive concepts that we've been taught at the beginning of the season. And we know that in order for us to have a good chance of winning, we know that we have to get stops on the defensive side of the floor. And through our first 10 games this year, we've noticed a big correlation in our wins and losses, that when we're able to get stops, we're very good at turning those stops, converting those stops into scores, and that's helping us get points on the board, and just they're turning into more wins when we see that we get more stops on the defensive side of the floor. Our second question comes from Ray, and it asks, how did you pick the University of Utah, and what is your major? Originally committing to Utah, I wanted to get into the pre-med side of courses, and wanted to try and get into the medical school. So my first major was exercise science. Unfortunately, because of my last school, I got behind in some classes I needed to take. So I just recently changed my major to communications, but I do plan on going back to school and finishing some pre-med classes and still try and get into medical school. Our last question comes from Timothy Ivan, and it asks, throughout this season, I have noticed the team struggle against zone defenses. How do you work on solving that problem and creating offensive opportunities against the zone? Well, we've been working extremely hard in practice to get the reps that we need against zone defenses, and we know that there's certain gaps that we need to attack and certain areas that the ball needs to get to for our zone offenses to be effective. And we can't just stand out on the perimeter and just swing the ball, not being a threat to the defense. And we know that we need to still continue to get the ball into the paint and look to drive and kick, or get the ball in the paint and kick out from the post to the perimeter. And once we start doing those things, our zone offense will continue to get better. So I just want to say thank you for tuning in, and don't forget about next week's edition of You Ask the Utes.